Hello everyone, welcome to EPG Pathshala. Me, Dr. Saurabh Madhurde, Assistant Professor in Sociology, the University of Burdwan. Today I'll be discussing on the paper Methodology of Research in Sociology. The module is module number 12 and it is entitled Exploring the Field, Research Cycles in Qualitative Approach. In talking about this entire topic, we will cover the following aspects in the module. First, the nature and characteristic features of qualitative research, and secondly, research spiral and features of research cycle in qualitative research. Now coming on to the first topic, nature of qualitative research. First, it is used in situations, or the qualitative research is used in situations that demand exploration into unknown sociocultural terrains. That means it explores into the virgin sociocultural terrains which has not been explored before. It is a new finding, new way of exploration into an unknown territory altogether. Number two, capture human lives as a dynamic process, because human lives is not something which is static. It is ever evolving. It is ever going. So it's an ever evolving process. We have to capture human lives as it appears to us in a qualitative way. Number three, through descriptions as a primary form of research output. A sort of descriptions means a sort of narrative. Whatever we will see, we'll describe it in facts. We can also use quantitative data, but the main idea, the main crux of our discussion, the main crux of our focus will be a descriptive analysis of the facts. Number four, the importance given to insider's perspective. Insider's perspective means from the perspective of the participant, from the perspective of the research subject. We have also to understand the emotion, the way of understanding the social world from the point of view of the participant. That is, it means the importance given to the insider's perspective. And lastly, flexible study design with openness in the selection of data collection and a way of selecting study participants. That means whatever we are getting from the field, we have to reevaluate it. We have to reevaluate it from the findings, and therefore we have to again go back to the field and again test whether those tools are in actuality, those tools are valid, those tools are in vogue. Whether or not it is in vogue, we have to reassess and reevaluate it and go back to the field. Now, talking of the nature of qualitative research, there are different natures of qualitative research. First is naturalism. We will come to each of them separately. First, I am just brushing about those following points. First is naturalism. Second is importance of context and emphasis on holism. Third is intensive or in-depth and long-term study. Fourth is flexible and evolving study design. Fifth is study of social life as a process. I have already discussed that social life is not something which is static, which is dynamic. So study of social life as a process. Next is insider's perspective, which I have already discussed in brief. Next is data collection methods, and last is data analysis. Now coming to the first topic, naturalism. Qualitative research aspires to study the empirical world as natural, undisturbed, unaltered, or unadulterated as possible. That means it describes or observes the social world in its rawness. Whatever the social world appears to us, we have to understand it, or we have to study it. We have to study it just as it is. This requires a cultural immersion, which means getting close to a community, knowing the participants as a real member of the community, become part of their life, which we also call participant observation, and observe the field unobtrusively. That means we have to observe the field unbiasedly and we have to just observe things as it appears to us in all its rawness. Next, the importance of context and emphasis on holism. Now, any behavior or process is studied and located in its context, and meaning of such behavior or process is derived from and consistent with that context. Context facilitates prediction, explanation, and understanding of the phenomena. Without context, we cannot study anything because everything is contextualized. Now, when we are talking about holism, because the point is importance of context and emphasis on holism. So when we are talking about holism, holism is the other side of the same coin as that of contextualism. It implies that the issue of concern is studied in its entirety, as a whole, interrelated with other aspects of social reality rather than an isolated entities. So, contextuality and holism are just the both sides of a single coin. Contextuality means to study the context, and holism means to study the phenomena in its entirety, giving due importance to the context under which the study is taking place. Next is intensive or in-depth and long-term analysis. This is another important, very important aspect of qualitative study. Now, qualitative research chooses to study a smaller community or an organization for a longer period of time. This is also called longitudinal study. Over a large period of time, you are studying a particular community. This facilitates an intensive holistic study as neutral as possible, although the term neutral itself is very elusive, but as neutral as possible, with a scope to focus on the context in great details. Not only to study the context in great details, but also to study the changes that have been taking place in the context over years, because it's a longitudinal study. Over years, the context might change. There are certain other variables that can also take place. There are certain intervening variables which have not shaped in earlier study, but it has shaped in the latter study. So you have also to understand those intervening variables which becomes a main or predominant variables in our next study. Now, establishing an increasingly stronger rapport with the community become a possibility, because without a sound rapport with the community at large, it is not possible to undertake a qualitative study, because it's just not a question of yes, no, thank you, very good. It's a question of understanding the reality from the perspective of the participants. The data collection process is not a one-time interaction between the researcher and the participants. Since it's a longitudinal study, it's not a one-time interaction between the participants and the person who is questioning. It's an ongoing process. It's like a life process. But it's a long drawn with opportunities for several meetings in different locations and from different angles. Different angles means different socio-cultural perspectives. Different perspectives, we have to understand the reality. The next is flexible and evolving the study design. As the data collection process is long drawn, the researchers need not and cannot go with a preconceived plan of data collection, because reality is something which is ever evolving. A popular quote is that we always chase the reality, but reality always escapes. So, in order to understand the reality in its rawness, we cannot have a preconceived or prefixed data plan or plan of data collection and be blind to new research questions that are thrown up by the emerging data. Hence, a researcher need not go with a neatly planned and rigid study design. Rather, he or she should go with an unstructured design. It's a flexible, unstructured design is the need of the hour for a qualitative study to be successful. The data collection process expected to constantly respond to the new observations and research questions that emerge from the field. because in a longitudinal study, this possibility is higher. Over the time, new research questions, new problems, new dilemmas do surface. In order to grasp reality in its entirety, in its holistic and contextual way, we have to bring in new findings, and we have to incorporate newer findings from the study. Next is the study of social life as a process. A holistic and intensive study also provides a qualitative study with the potential to study phenomena as a process. We cannot study a particular phenomena as a thing, as an object. It is a process, an evolving process. As Bryman rightly pointed out, that there is an implicit longitudinal element built into much qualitative research. Hence, they become most suitable to study social life as a process rather than a time-frozen and fixed events. Now coming on to the next point, which is insider's perspective. Qualitative research tries to interpretatively understand insider's perspectives. Now, the insider's perspectives is also called an emic perspective, E-M-I-C, emic perspective, that explain events or process from outside. It aims to understand the meaning attributed to members of the community embedded within their worldview. Worldview means embedded within their life world or the world of everyday life at which they are seeing the social world to any event or process. Now, the next is the data collection methods. Data collected in qualitative studies are usually in the form of narratives and descriptions. In-depth interviews and participant observations are the principal methods of data collection used in qualitative research. In-depth interviews and participant observations are not only the principal methods of data collection, but they are the cardinal methods, because without them, we cannot have a holistic understanding of the field at large. Other methods include textual analysis, FGD, or which is called focus group discussions, and participatory methods. Ethnography and case study are composite methods which are used as a combination of methods listed above. That means there is no hard and fast rule that each and every method is mutually exclusive and cannot be undertaken without the help of other methods. They can be used in conjunction with other methods as well. Now coming on to the topic of data analysis. Data analysis in qualitative research is preferred to be a concurrent process taking place along with data collection. This is because data collection is usually a protracted process. A research has the opportunity to look at the data and to read, reread, and graphic with the field of notes continuously throughout the period of data collection. Gaps in the data, when identified, are sought to be filled with further data collection. New patterns and explanations are arrived at and tested back in the field, because the gaps, whenever we are going into the field, there might be certain gaps in our data collection which has to be identified, which has to be sought after, and they have to be further clarified, revisited with further data collection. These new patterns and explanations are arrived and are tested back in the empirical field. Now coming on to the topic of characteristics of qualitative research. Qualitative research has certain characteristics. Mainly there are three cardinal characteristics which we will be studying. First is that it aspires to study the empirical world as natural as possible, which I have already discussed. It tries to study, analyze empirical world in its full rawness or as it is, unaltered, unadulterated, in its quote-unquote virgin form. It studies a smaller community or organization over a longer period of time. That means a longitudinal study using participatory methods. You have to be a participant of that particular community and have to study the different rites, rituals, their lifestyles, their values. You have to study their way of speaking, their diet, everything you have to study over a longer period of time through participant observation or using participatory methods. The data collection method is, or data collection process is open, flexible, and is expected to continuously and constantly respond to new observations and research questions that emerge from the field. That means we just cannot take any data for granted. We always have to be open, flexible to new research findings. Now, coming on to the topic of data collection methods in qualitative research. There are certain data collection methods in qualitative research. First is in-depth interviews. Second is participant observations. Next is textual analysis. Another is focus group discussions. Next is participatory methods, ethnography, and case study. These methods can be used exclusively and also can be used in conjunction with other methods. Now, coming on to the topic of data analysis. There are basically two types of data analysis. One is terminal analysis, another is concurrent analysis. We are coming to the concurrent analysis just after this. Now, for the time being, what is data analysis? Data analysis is a qualitative research and is preferred to be in form of concurrent analysis taking place along with data collection. That is why it is called concurrent. That means in conjunction with other analysis. There are essential stages of data analysis. First is, it's like a cycle. First is noticing things. You have to notice the things. Then you have to collect things. That means collect data. And you have to think about those things. Now, this noticing, collecting, and thinking about things, these are intertwined in a cyclical process. And they are mutually reinforcing. It also gives way to a sort of knowledge generation. This qualitative study also gives way to knowledge generation, which itself is a cyclical process, which is inductive and deductive. That means it's a process involving both induction as well as deduction. Coming on to the topic, the research spiral in qualitative research. Now, individually, every research is also usually understood as a cyclic or spiral process, more or less enumerated as follows. First is exploring the conceptual field. You have to explore the conceptual field. You have to go into the details of the conceptual field. Arriving at the research problems. Where there is no problem, there is no research. It's a popular saying. So you have to arrive at a research problem. Design the study, how to collect data, where to collect data, the sample, the way of sample collection, different things. Designing the study. This is called research design. Now, collection of the data. How to collect the data, in which tool you will use in collecting the data. Analyzing the data. There are certain ways. Today, in computer, there are certain techniques in which you can just put those data and the analysis is complete for you. So, analyzing the data, coming up with the findings, that means it is also called data analysis and findings, and to make inferences that perhaps would feed into the new research questions and so on. And another thing is important here is that certain recommendations a researcher can also give on the basis of the findings that he gets from the field. Now, coming on to the topic of Hutter-Hennink qualitative research cycle. The Hutter-Hennink qualitative research cycle, suggested by Hennink, Hutter, and Bailey, captures this complexity to a large extent. They conceive the research process in three distinct but interrelated subcycles circumscribed within a larger cycle. That means they are a part of a larger cycle, these three smaller circles. The first is the design circle or the design cycle. The second is the ethnographic cycle. And the third and the last one is the analytic cycle. Now, I am coming on to each of them individually. The first is the design cycle. What is this design cycle? The design cycle captures the entire process of conceptualization up to arriving at a broad design of study. That means it captures the entire process of conceptualization in its entirety, and it throws up a broad design of study under which the study has to be conducted. The second is the ethnographic cycle, which represents the process of qualitative data collection. It is a process through which data is collected qualitatively using different tools and methods. And when the design is set, the data is collected, whatever remains is about the analysis of the data, which is the third cycle, which is called the analysis of the data cycle, which captures the component of data analysis with sub-elements of quote-unquote developing codes, description, and comparison. That means using codes, they describe and compare with other findings. It categorizes and conceptualizes the data and theory. And through this, developing codes, description and comparison, categorizing and conceptualizing data, and holistic theory development takes place in an interlinked cyclic manner. Therefore, the qualitative process itself is not mutually exclusive. In today's social science, we always go for triangulation, whereby researchers go for a fusion of different methods, both quantitative as well as qualitative. Here I have discussed about qualitative methods and processes. Now, this can be used separately according to the need, according to the research problem at hand, but they can also be used in conjunction with other quantitative methods to get a holistic picture of the social reality. Thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you.